Spider-Man is a character that is near and dear to hearts all around the world. He has changed and affected the lives of so many, including mine. If I never saw and enjoyed the first 3 Sam Raimi Spidey films as a kid, I would have been a completely different person. I idolized this character when I was younger and have been associated with him by many people. Heck, I got a Spider-Man toilet seat this year. I wanted to be Spidey when I was younger, and it showed. I remember jumping between cars in the parking lot and luckily not getting hurt. And even after 2 years since Superman became my favorite superhero, Spidey still has a place in my heart that no other fictional character will ever have. It's very interesting how this fictional character has affected not just comic books, but the personal lives of the people who consume them. As crazy and odd as it sounds, the world would have been a totally different place without the webhead. My name is Joshua C, and today we are going to look at where it all started. Amazing Fantasy 15, aka the first appearance of Spider-Man. Welcome to the Comics That Made Us, the show where I talk about why a certain comic was great and its impact on the comic book industry. Today we talk about Amazing Fantasy number 15. When Stan first pitched the Spider-Man character to Martin Goodman, the editor-in-chief of Marvel at the time, he rejected the idea and thought it was terrible. But Stan was insistent. He knew this character had potential and decided to put him in a comic anyway. Stan Lee decided to put Spider-Man in a series called Amazing Adult Fantasy, where each issue was composed of a few short stories. The series wasn't selling well and was about to release its final issue. The last issue, where the series' name was changed from Amazing Adult Fantasy to Amazing Fantasy, is where Stan Lee decided to place the Spider-Man origin. Amazing Fantasy 15, written by Stan Lee and illustrated by Steve Ditko, was released on August of 1962, and the rest is history. Amazing Fantasy 15 is an anthology book, meaning that it was a collection of stories, and all of them were great. There was a tale about an old man ringing a giant bell every day, a funny story about a man who is tricked into slavery, and another comedy with a twist about Martians. These stories are pretty good, but the highlight of Amazing Fantasy 15 was the first story in the issue, the origin of the Amazing Spider-Man. This iconic 11-page wonder was the beginning of something truly astonishing. Thanks to this story, Amazing Fantasy 15 sold a ton of copies, and Spider-Man got his own series. But what exactly made the tale of Spidey's origin such a success? First of all, let's talk about the story. Spidey's origin is one that has been told and retold so many times that they didn't even show it in Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But there is a reason why it's been retold so many times. It's because it was told so well the first time, and it means so much to the character that people simply have to retell it. A bully teenager named Peter Parker, raised by 2 loving relatives, gets bitten by a radioactive spider. He receives tremendous power due to the spider bite and manages to become successful and famous. But along with his increasing fame and fortune, his selfishness, pride, and irresponsibility also increase. He allows a criminal to get away, even though he could have stopped the situation with ease. This act turns on Peter. The same criminal who Peter let go kills his uncle. From a prideful jerk, Peter Parker becomes someone better. He learns responsibility, but in the most tragic way possible, and chooses to dedicate his life to save the people of New York. Spider-Man's origin story is historically significant, and for good reason. It was very unique. Spider-Man had a clear and strong motivation to be a superhero. His character stemmed out of tragedy but not like the tragedy that turned other people to superheroes. He, unlike characters similar to Batman, whose parents were murdered out of his control, Peter Parker could have actually done something to prevent his uncle's death. Spidey's origin is one that doesn't end with the superhero being victorious and glorified, but instead being guilty and defeated. The origin of Spidey didn't simply show a human becoming super, but a jerk becoming a hero. The story of Spidey didn't just show a boy growing power outwardly, but a terrible person growing inwardly. This iconic tale shows us that the actions we make in our lives truly matter and can affect the people around us. It teaches us that life is unexpected and we need to learn how to adapt to new environments. It also tells us that we shouldn't be prideful, cruel, and selfish, because it would only make the world suffer even more. Oh yeah, and the obvious one. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. The origin story of Spider-Man wasn't amazing simply because the story was so close to perfection structurally and plot-wise, but also because of the moral values and lessons it teaches. Spidey's origin story also couldn't have been as amazing as it was if it weren't for the spectacular art in the story. When Stan formulated the character of Peter Parker, he first turned to Jack Kirby, the co-creator of like a billion Marvel characters, and even DC characters. He was an industry-defining artist who was extremely talented in making really good art with power at incredibly rapid speeds. Stan didn't like his design of Spider-Man though. It was too heroic for his tastes. Although Kirby's design of the character remains a mystery, it's okay. Spider-Man's design in his first issue is perfect, and was created by none other than Steve Ditko, a great artist who is famous for his work on Mr. A and on horror comics. Steve Ditko's style was perfect for the Spider-Man character. Jack Kirby actually illustrated the cover for Amazing Fantasy 15 using Steve Ditko's design. It was a very good cover because it was very eye-catching. But as I mentioned earlier, Steve Ditko made the design of Spidey and did the interior of the comic, and it really shows. Unlike the epic and muscular Spider-Man shown on the cover, Spider-Man in the book was stick-thin and was pretty creepy. He looked less like a hero and more like an actual nerd. Steve Ditko's art fits the story and the characters of Spider-Man very well, but Steve's style wasn't the only thing good about his art in Amazing Fantasy 15. The art itself is very brilliant and shows Steve Ditko's expertise as a comic book artist. How he plays with color choices and character positioning is truly remarkable. There are so many videos about how great the art in this is, and mind you, this story is only 11 pages long. And since I want you guys to watch the other amazing videos about Amazing Fantasy 15's art, I'm gonna give you only one example of the brilliance of Steve's art in the comic. The example is in the final fight scene between Spidey and the criminal who killed Uncle Ben. Steve Ditko plays with the scale of the characters very well. Even if you remove the text in these pages and have no idea what the story is about, you know who's the boss of this fight. Spider-Man is positioned and framed in a way where he's much larger compared to the criminal, and it shows who's on the winning side. Spider-Man's size and poses in these two epic pages displays his power over the criminal, and it's really cool. This iconic scene demonstrates the power of framing, perspective, and scale in comics or in art in general. This is just one example of Steve Ditko's wonderful and clever art in this 11-page origin story. Aside from the epic story and the brilliant art of Spidey's origin, the thing that made Amazing Fantasy 15 such a success was the star of the story, the hero himself, the Amazing Spider-Man. What made the story work perfectly was the character. The character of Peter Parker was revolutionary, and his impact can still be felt today. Stan and Steve probably never expected the character to change superhero comics forever, but he did. First of all, Peter Parker was one of the first teenage heroes who stood on his own. Superhero teenagers were pretty rare and were mostly sidekicks. Spider-Man, being a teenager, showed that anyone can be a superhero. You could contribute to the world, no matter how young you are. Spider-Man was relatable because he was an average teenager. His actions and mean thoughts in the beginning even express it. The webhead captured the teenage audience because of this. Spidey, although being a teenager, was a solo hero. Now, we live in a world where independent teenage heroes are very common, and it's really cool. And Teenage Peter was definitely the start of it. The next thing that made Peter work so well was his normalcy. As Brian Conan states in his excellent book, Was Superman a Spy? Quote, "The Spider-Man series was notable for the time because of how much of an everyman Peter Parker was. This was not some millionaire playboy, nor was he a successful reporter. He was a young adult trying to make his way in the world and failing as often as he succeeded." End quote. It's very ironic, but what made Spidey special was that he was normal. He wasn't some important man in the world, he was a bullied teenager. Peter Parker's average place in the world made him the hero of the people. Unlike the larger-than-life superheroes usually filling the pages of comics, Spider-Man was very normal underneath the mask. This made the readers connect with him. When people read about Peter Parker, they could identify with him. It further showed that anyone can be a superhero, even an awkward nerd. When people looked at Pete's life, they could identify with him in his struggles and in his victories. Not only did Peter's average life make him relatable to readers, but also his flawed and understandable character. When he first received his powers, Peter did not immediately choose to become a hero like the Fantastic Four did, but instead chose to lead a life in pursuit of fame and fortune. Honestly, we would probably do the same thing, and Peter's decision of letting the criminal escape is a very selfish and rude one, but it's a choice that some of us would probably make in the same situation. Peter Parker's choices, actions, and reactions were very human and very understandable to the audience. The character of Peter kind of acts as a substitute for us, the reader. And this is why many related to Pete. It took his uncle dying just for him to wake up. His sense of responsibility stemmed out of a tragedy that's able to scar somebody for life. The character was relatable because he was an everyman, both outside and inside. His character flaws and cruel motives in the beginning made a ton of sense. He was mean and hated the world around him because he was bullied, and everyone treated him like a nobody, except Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Peter showed that anyone can be a superhero, no matter what your social status is, or no matter how cruel you were in the past. He was groundbreaking and changed the comic book landscape forever. In summary, Amazing Fantasy 15 is truly a remarkable comic. The origin of Spidey had an amazing plot, brilliant and story-fitting art, and a character unlike any other who is powerful, yet was very human and relatable to all kinds of people. The origin story in Amazing Fantasy 15 may be viewed today as simple and outdated, but the issue should be respected for its historical significance and its revolutionary elements. The issue introduced a new type of origin story, and a character that was relatable and very human. Spider-Man showed the comic industry and other superheroes that it doesn't matter to audiences how powerful a superhero is, but it's his connection with the reader that counts the most. A mint condition copy of Amazing Fantasy 15 was sold for $1.1 million, and I'm pretty sure a lot of avid comic fans are saving to buy even just a low-grade copy of the comic. Hopefully, people don't buy the comic just to flex how rich they are, but to appreciate the comic even more. Amazing Fantasy 15 shouldn't be viewed simply as one of the most expensive comics of all time, but more so should be seen as a comic that changed comics forever because of how well crafted and revolutionary the 11-page origin was. Also, if you guys are wondering, the Amazing Fantasy 15 showed in this video is just a reprint of the actual comic. I will probably not buy a copy of the actual comic in my entire life because it's way too expensive and I could be spending money on other things. Anyway, if there's one thing I want you to learn from this video, it's that you shouldn't let others put your creative ideas down. When Stan proposed the Spidey idea to Martin Goodman, he replied negatively and thought Spider-Man was a terrible idea. But Stan didn't listen. He, along with Steve Ditko, created the character anyway, and it paid off. It not only boosted Marvel's comic sales, but changed superhero comics altogether. If Stan Lee chose not to push through with the Spider-Man comic, not only would Spidey cease to exist, but we might live in a world with no teenage superheroes who are independent and no characters in superhero stories who people could relate to. So, if any of you out there has a brilliant creative idea, don't let anyone put you down. Go through with it, because it might make the world a better place. Anyway, that's all for today. Hope you enjoyed the second episode of the Comics That Made Us. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more content like this. My name is Joshua C, and I will see you in the next comic book video.